Why did everyone say I was overreacting about the stupid stickers? Mrs. Hartwell had this reward system in third grade where she gave out these holographic stickers that looked like little rainbows when you tilted them in the light. Every kid in our class was obsessed with collecting them because she said at the end of the month, whoever had the most stickers would get to be her special helper for the whole next month. But there was something weird about how she handed them out that made my stomach hurt every time I watched. The boys in our class could answer questions perfectly, help other students, clean the whiteboard, organize the supply closet, and we'd get maybe one or two regular boring stickers that looked like they came from the dollar store. But certain girls in our class, specifically the ones Mrs. Hartwell called her mature young ladies, would get handfuls of the special rainbow stickers for doing absolutely nothing I could see. I started paying attention during our daily quiet reading time because that's when Mrs. Hartwell would walk around the classroom with her sticker sheet. She'd stop at Sophia's desk and whisper something that made Sophia blush and giggle, then hand her 3 rainbow stickers. Then she'd go to Chloe and do the same thing, running her hand through Chloe's hair while giving her 4 stickers. Madison would get 5 stickers just for smiling at Mrs. Hartwell when she walked by. Meanwhile, I'd sit there with my book open, reading perfectly, and following every rule, and Mrs. Hartwell would walk right past my desk like I was invisible. When I raised my hand to answer questions, she'd call on someone else. When I volunteered to help with classroom jobs, she'd say she had enough helpers already. But those same girls kept getting stickers for what looked like absolutely nothing. After 2 weeks of watching this unfair system, I decided to document everything like I'd seen lawyers do on TV shows. I brought a small notebook to school and started writing down exactly what happened every day. September 15th, Sophia got 6 stickers for being sweet. Chloe got 4 stickers for having pretty hair. Madison got 7 stickers for being such a good listener. Meanwhile, Aiden got 0 stickers even though he helped Mrs. Hartwell carry heavy boxes from the supply room. The other boys in my class started getting frustrated too. Tommy asked Mrs. Hartwell directly what he needed to do to earn rainbow stickers, and she told him boys weren't naturally good at the kinds of behaviors that earned special rewards. When Derek offered to help organize her desk during recess, she said she preferred having girls help with that kind of task, because they were more careful and gentle. I wrote down every single thing she said, including the exact words she used when dismissing the boys' efforts. Boys are too rough for delicate work. Girls understand how to be helpful in the right way. Some children are naturally better at earning rewards. Each comment felt like a punch to the stomach, but I kept documenting everything. My documentation expanded beyond just sticker distribution. I started noting how Mrs. Hartwell assigned classroom jobs, chose reading partners, and selected students for special activities. The pattern was always the same. Her favorite girls got the good opportunities while boys and less favored girls got ignored or assigned boring tasks. During library time, Mrs. Hartwell would let Sophia, Chloe, and Madison choose books from the teacher's special collection while the rest of us had to stick to the regular shelves. During art projects, those same girls got to use the expensive markers and glitter while we used crayons and regular paper. When parent volunteers came to help with activities, Mrs. Hartwell always paired her favorites with the fun helpers while sending the rest of us to work with whoever was left. I showed my documentation to my mom at dinner, explaining how the sticker system was completely rigged against boys and certain girls in the class. My mom barely looked at my notebook before pushing it back across the table. "Honey, teachers know what they're doing," she said in that dismissive voice adults use when they think kids are being dramatic. "Those girls probably earned their stickers somehow. Maybe they're better at following directions or being polite. But I followed directions perfectly, and I was always polite." I tried explaining this to my mom, but she just sighed and said, life wasn't always fair, and I needed to focus on my own behavior, instead of worrying about what other kids were doing. When I pressed her about the specific examples in my notebook, she said I was probably misunderstanding the situation because I was jealous of other students getting attention. That response made me even more determined to prove the system was broken. If my own mother wouldn't believe me, I'd have to gather even more evidence that no one could ignore. I started timing how long Mrs. Hartwell spent with different students, measuring the exact number of stickers each person received, and documenting every conversation I could overhear. The next day, I asked Mrs. Hartwell directly what I needed to do to earn rainbow stickers like the other girls. She looked at me with this weird smile and said some students were naturally better at earning rewards than others, and I should just focus on being a good student. When I pressed her for specific actions I could take, she said the special stickers were for children who showed extra maturity, and I'd understand when I was older. That answer didn't satisfy me at all. I was just as mature as Sophia or Chloe or Madison. I got better grades than most of them, and I never got in trouble for talking or not paying attention. So I decided to expand my documentation project and started noting every single interaction between Mrs. Hartwell and her favorite students. During math time, I watched Mrs. Hartwell spend extra time at the special girls' desks, explaining problems they already understood, while ignoring boys who actually needed help. When Tommy raised his hand for assistance with a difficult multiplication problem, she told him to figure it out himself, because that's how boys learn best. But when Sophia pretended to be confused about an easy addition problem, Mrs. Hartwell sat beside her for 10 minutes providing individual instruction. I documented these discrepancies in detail, including the specific math problems involved and how much time was spent helping different students. The pattern was so obvious that I couldn't understand how other adults didn't see it. Even the parent volunteers seemed to notice that certain students got preferential treatment, but they never questioned Mrs. Hartwell's methods. During art class, I watched Mrs. Hartwell spend extra time at the special girls' tables, putting her hands on their shoulders while helping them with their projects. She'd lean in really close and whisper things that made them giggle. After art class, she'd give them rainbow stickers for their beautiful creativity, even when their artwork looked exactly like everyone else's. The way she touched them made me uncomfortable, even though I couldn't explain why. She never put her hands on the boys' shoulders or got that close to us when offering help. She'd maintain distance and speak in a normal voice instead of the whispered, intimate tone she used with her favorites. I wrote all of this down in my notebook, including direct quotes of what Mrs. Hartwell said to different students. I noted her body language, the physical contact, and the different vocal tones she used. The pattern was becoming clearer every day, but I still couldn't figure out what made those particular girls so special. My older sister Kelsey found me writing in my notebook one evening and asked what I was working on so intently. When I explained the situation, she listened carefully and asked to see my documentation. Her expression grew more serious as she read through my detailed observations. "This doesn't sound normal," she said after reviewing several pages. "Teachers aren't supposed to have obvious favorites like this, and the way you're describing her behavior with certain students sounds really inappropriate." Kelsey had just taken a health class that covered inappropriate adult behavior, and she recognized warning signs that I was too young to understand. She explained that adults who gave special privileges to selected children, especially when combined with physical contact and secretive behavior, were displaying concerning patterns. She suggested I continue documenting, but also try to observe exactly what Mrs. Hartwell was whispering to her special students. If the conversations were about schoolwork or normal encouragement, maybe there was an innocent explanation. But if Mrs. Hartwell was saying inappropriate things or making the girls feel special in weird ways, that would be a serious problem requiring adult intervention. The next day, during quiet reading time, I positioned myself closer to Sophia's desk so I could hear what Mrs. Hartwell whispered to her. When Mrs. Hartwell approached with her sticker sheet, she leaned down and said something about Sophia looking very pretty today, and how some girls were more special than others because they understood how to make adults happy. She ran her fingers through Sophia's hair while saying she'd like to spend more time with special girls like her, maybe during lunch or after school when they could have private conversations about grown-up topics. Sophia looked uncomfortable but smiled nervously, probably not understanding why the attention felt wrong. That conversation made me feel sick to my stomach, even though I couldn't exactly explain why. I wrote down Mrs. Hartwell's exact words in my notebook, including the way she touched Sophia's hair and how long she stayed at her desk. The interaction felt different from normal teacher-student conversations, more personal and secretive. Over the following days, I managed to overhear similar conversations with other favored students. Mrs. Hartwell told Chloe she was developing into a beautiful young woman and looked more mature than other girls her age. She told Madison that some children were special enough to be trusted with adult secrets and responsibilities. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: compliments about physical appearance, comments about maturity levels, and hints about special privileges or private time together. Mrs. Hartwell would touch their hair, shoulders, or backs while talking, maintaining physical contact throughout the interaction. I documented every conversation I could overhear, noting specific phrases and describing the physical contact involved. The pattern was disturbing even to my 8-year-old understanding, though I lacked the vocabulary to articulate exactly why these interactions felt wrong. When I showed this new information to Kelsey, her face went completely white as she read. She immediately called our parents into the room and demanded they read my documentation immediately. She explained that what I'd observed matched textbook examples of grooming behavior they'd studied in her health class. "We need to call the school right now," Kelsey said in a voice I'd never heard before. She grabbed my notebook and marched into the living room where our parents were watching TV. "This isn't about unfair stickers anymore. This is about inappropriate adult behavior toward children." My parents initially tried to dismiss Kelsey's concerns the same way they'd dismissed mine, saying she was overreacting and teachers were trained professionals who knew appropriate boundaries. But Kelsey wouldn't let them brush this off. She made them read specific entries from my notebook out loud, pointing out the inappropriate comments and physical contact I'd described. She asked them how they'd feel if someone said those things about her when she was 8 years old, or if an adult touched her inappropriately while making comments about her appearance and maturity. The questions forced my parents to consider the situation from a different perspective. My dad's expression changed completely as he read through my notes. He'd been dismissive before, but now he was asking detailed questions about specific incidents. He wanted to know exactly what Mrs. Hartwell had said, how often the inappropriate conversations happened, and whether other students had noticed anything unusual. That night, I heard my parents talking in their bedroom in urgent whispers that went on for hours. They were calling other parents, researching school policies, and discussing whether to involve law enforcement immediately or start with the school administration. The next morning, my mom called the school and demanded an emergency meeting with Principal Vaughn and Mrs. Hartwell. She said there were serious concerns about classroom conduct that needed immediate attention. The urgency in her voice made it clear this wasn't a routine parent conference. The meeting was scheduled for that afternoon, and my mom asked me to bring my notebook and explain everything I'd observed. I felt nervous about confronting Mrs. Hartwell directly, but my mom said I'd done the right thing by documenting everything, and I shouldn't be afraid to speak up about inappropriate behavior. In Principal Vaughn's office, Mrs. Hartwell sat across from us with her arms crossed, looking annoyed that her teaching methods were being questioned. She dismissed my concerns as jealousy from a student who wasn't getting enough attention. Some children have difficulty accepting that rewards must be earned, she said, while looking directly at me with cold eyes. Children also make up stories when they're not the center of attention, she added with a condescending smile. 8-year-olds don't understand adult motivations and often misinterpret normal teacher-student interactions. But when my mom started reading specific quotes from my notebook, Mrs. Hartwell's expression changed completely. Her face went pale when my mom read the comment about certain girls being more special than others, and she started stumbling over her words when asked to explain what she meant by telling 8-year-old girls they were mature. Principal Vaughn, who had been dismissive of my concerns just days earlier, suddenly became very interested in the detailed documentation I'd compiled. He asked Mrs. Hartwell to explain her reward system and why certain students received significantly more recognition than others. Her answers became increasingly defensive and incoherent as my mom continued reading from my notebook. When confronted with the quotes about private conversations and physical contact, Mrs. Hartwell claimed she was just being nurturing and supportive to students who needed extra encouragement. She said some children responded better to personal attention and physical affection, and she was just using methods that worked best for different personality types. But Principal Vaughn was taking notes now, and he asked specific questions about school policies regarding physical contact with students and private meetings with individual children. Mrs. Hartwell's explanations became more desperate as she realized the seriousness of the accusations. The meeting ended with Principal Vaughn saying he needed to review the situation more carefully and would be conducting additional interviews with students and parents. Mrs. Hartwell was instructed not to discuss the meeting with anyone and to continue normal classroom activities while the investigation proceeded. That evening, Principal Vaughn called other parents whose children had been mentioned in my documentation. He asked them to speak with their daughters about interactions with Mrs. Hartwell, using age-appropriate questions to determine if inappropriate behavior had occurred. Several parents discovered that their daughters had been staying after school for special help sessions that involved personal conversations rather than academic instruction. The girls reported that Mrs. Hartwell asked them about their home lives, their bodies, and their relationships with family members. One parent found photos on their daughter's tablet showing Mrs. Hartwell hugging students in ways that seemed inappropriate for a teacher-student relationship. Another discovered that their child had been given a special necklace that Mrs. Hartwell said was their secret and shouldn't be mentioned to parents. As more evidence emerged, Principal Vaughn contacted the district superintendent and school board members to report the allegations. They immediately placed Mrs. Hartwell on administrative leave, pending a full investigation by trained professionals. The next day, our class had a substitute teacher, and we were told Mrs. Hartwell was taking some time off for personal reasons. Several students asked when she'd be coming back, but the substitute just said she didn't know and we should focus on our schoolwork. Child Protective Services investigators arrived at the school within days to interview students who had been identified as potentially affected by Mrs. Hartwell's behavior. They used specially trained interviewers who knew how to talk with children about sensitive topics without leading them or causing additional trauma. The investigation revealed a clear pattern of grooming behavior that had been escalating over several months. Mrs. Hartwell had been selecting specific students based on perceived vulnerability, gradually increasing inappropriate physical contact and comments, and working toward more serious boundary violations. Several girls reported that Mrs. Hartwell had asked them to keep secrets about their special relationship, given them gifts that weren't shared with other students, and made them feel like they were more mature and special than their classmates. These were classic grooming techniques designed to isolate victims and normalize inappropriate behavior. The investigators found that Mrs. Hartwell had been documenting her interactions with favored students through photos and notes that she kept in a locked drawer in her classroom. When authorities searched her desk, they discovered detailed records of each child's responses to various approaches and strategies for advancing the inappropriate relationships. Within 2 weeks, Mrs. Hartwell was arrested on multiple charges related to child endangerment and inappropriate conduct with minors. The evidence against her was overwhelming, including my detailed documentation, witness statements from students, physical evidence from her classroom, and testimony from trained investigators. The local news covered the arrest, describing how an 8-year-old student's complaint about unfair sticker distribution had led to uncovering a serious case of predatory behavior in the classroom. Several experts commented on how children often notice inappropriate patterns that adults miss or dismiss. The school district implemented immediate policy changes requiring multiple adults to be present during any individual instruction time, mandatory background checks for all staff members, and comprehensive training on recognizing signs of inappropriate behavior. They also created a confidential reporting system where students could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Mrs. Hartwell's teaching license was permanently revoked, and she was banned from working in any capacity involving children. The district settled with affected families to cover counseling costs and other damages resulting from her inappropriate behavior. The girls who had been targeted received specialized counseling to help them understand that the inappropriate attention and comments they'd received weren't their fault. Several parents expressed gratitude that my persistence had exposed the situation before more serious abuse could occur. My documentation was used as evidence in the criminal trial, where Mrs. Hartwell ultimately pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy court process. She received a sentence that included prison time, probation, and mandatory registration as a sex offender. The case became a training example for educators and law enforcement on the importance of taking children's concerns seriously, even when they initially appear to be minor complaints about classroom policies. Experts noted that predators often hide behind legitimate authority roles and use seemingly normal activities to mask inappropriate behavior. Several months later, I received a letter from the State Attorney General's office thanking me for my detailed documentation and explaining how my evidence had helped protect other children from similar situations. They said my persistence in documenting what seemed like unfair treatment had prevented more serious abuse from occurring. The new teacher, Ms. Foster, implemented a completely transparent reward system where every student could earn recognition through clearly defined achievements that were posted on the classroom wall. She treated all students with equal respect and maintained appropriate professional boundaries at all times. Looking back, I realized that my initial frustration about unfair sticker distribution had led me to uncover something much more serious that could have continued for years if I'd listened to the adults who told me to stop overreacting. Sometimes what looks like a small problem is actually a symptom of something much bigger and more dangerous. The experience taught me that children's voices matter, and that persistent documentation can provide crucial evidence when adults fail to recognize serious problems. It also showed me that standing up for what's right, even when everyone tells you you're wrong, can make a real difference in protecting vulnerable people. My parents apologized for initially dismissing my concerns and implemented a family policy that any worries about adult behavior would be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. They realized that their automatic trust in authority figures had almost allowed a dangerous situation to continue unchecked. The incident also led to district-wide changes in how student complaints were handled, with new procedures ensuring that concerns about teacher behavior would be properly investigated rather than dismissed as childhood drama or misunderstandings. 3 years later, I received an update that Mrs. Hartwell had been denied parole and would remain in prison for the full length of her sentence. The parole board cited the systematic nature of her crimes and the risk she posed to children as reasons for keeping her incarcerated. The case became part of mandatory training for new teachers, showing how seemingly innocent reward systems and special privileges could be used to mask grooming behavior. Education students learned to recognize warning signs and maintain appropriate boundaries with all students. For me, the most important outcome was knowing that my refusal to accept "that's just how things work" had protected other children from experiencing trauma that could have affected them for the rest of their lives. Sometimes the smallest voices can make the biggest difference when they refuse to stay quiet about injustice.